Yo.
How's it going? Stablecoins, woo! All right, there we go. All right, we have a debate, centralized versus decentralized stablecoins. Before we begin, Seraphim, Luca, would you guys do a little intro to yourselves?
This feels like Hillary Clinton versus Trump debate, you know, like, yeah, crooked Hillary. Yeah, Seraphim, head of growth at Ethena. We have a synthetic dollar protocol that launched in February. We've grown to $3.6 billion within that time. We have a lot of things going on, but basically we call it the internet bond, and the whole mechanism is basically the cash basis trades generated on centralized exchanges. So we take Bitcoin, we take ETH, and we delta hedge it, and we get the yield from that. So that's the gist of it.
And hi everyone, I'm Luca. I'm the founder, one of the founders and CEO of M0 Labs. We are actually creating a decentralized network that can connect several stable coins and provide similar standards and fungible liquidity across the ecosystem. There are reasons why we think that should be the way to go, but there should be the way to integrate centralized stable coins, but I'm sure we're going to get into that later.
Yeah, and so for the first question to you, Seraphim, before we get into anything, we should have a way to measure like what is decentralized and centralized. So what is your methodology in measuring how decentralized or centralized a stablecoin is?
Yeah, the way I think of it is probably governance versus just on-chain components. If you take something like liquidity, there's very few off-chain components to it. It seems to be pretty much automated by smart contracts. The custody is in smart contracts. That's on one side. And on the other side, you've got stuff like Tether and Circle, where it's completely whitelisted to mint, redeem. The funds are not on-chain. They are in some custodian accounts. It's backed not by crypto assets, but by fiat. And if you hold government bonds, you kind of have to have a legal entity, operational stuff, compliance. It just becomes like a non-smart contract-based system, where the on-chain element is just having a tokenized claim. So that's the spectrum. And I think most projects fit somewhere in between the two, depending on how they're built. That's how I see it.
Yeah, to you, Luca.
Yeah, I actually think that decentralized stablecoins is a very bad definition. Like stablecoins is actually a pretty bad definition. In my opinion, I agree with Seraphim that decentralized stablecoin is all about governance. So how actually credibly neutral is the governance that decides the mechanisms behind it. But I think there is a lot of confusion because people talk about decentralized stablecoins when there are stablecoins backed by on-chain collateral, on-chain commodities, which by definition are credibly decentralized. They are two different things. And then obviously on the other side, you have centralized non-commodity assets. They are backing centralized issuers like Tether or Circle, for example, which is an extreme. But I also believe that every stablecoin needs a decentralized network that connects them. Even Ethena. I mean, Ethena's demand is Maker. Maker is a so-called decentralized governance on-chain. So I think they're operating at a different level of the stack.
Yeah, and do you guys think there are other parties involved in how centralized or decentralized a stablecoin is? For example, Oracle providers, liquidity, making sure there's capital, coordinating everything. You know, it's hard to say like how decentralized or decentralized something is.
Yeah, I guess it depends how immutable it is. If it's immutable like liquidity, there's not much governance involved in the first place. If there is governance, so governance is people, which means it's kind of, it has to be a little bit bullshit, right? It can't be fully decentralized. People just have their own interests. They align in different ways, and if you're dealing with people, you'll always be dealing with a level of centralization. It's just the question is how accountable it is. Do we know who these people are? Is there like a process where you can influence if you have delegates or single voters on certain issues? So I feel like we're doing great things in governance just in terms of risk disclosures and accountability. But very often I feel like if it's a lending protocol, which is a good example, it's just very hard to reach a level of full decentralization. It's just unachievable, sort of. But we can do what we can, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what I think I was saying before, I think any issuer of currency requires a network on top that connects them, and that should be reasonably decentralized. Even we're talking about like decentralized issuers like Circle, there is a decentralized system on top, which is the Federal Reserve System and the government. In theory, these guys, the powers are decentralized enough, they're not going to rug pull all of us. That's obviously an assumption, but it's a process. I think it's a spectrum of quality of articles, governors, governor participants, standards, rule of law, and that the powers are balanced enough. I think it's very difficult. I agree with what Seraphim was saying, is that it's very difficult to run a fully permissionless system that is actually creating credit. So there is always a spectrum.
Yeah.
Give us something we can disagree on. Let's make this fun. Like it's becoming too much of an agreement fest.
What are the risks associated with centralized stablecoins, and what are the risks associated with decentralized stablecoins?
Yeah. Okay. So centralized stablecoins were generally dollar asset. We try not to call Ethena stablecoins because, well, we initially started with that, and then eventually kind of thought if it's not backed by fiat, there's no way to really kind of guarantee there's going to be one-to-one. So we stick to synthetic dollar name. At the end of the day, it's like looking into constitution and interpreting things. I'm not super religious about it, really. But the point was, if you do centralized stuff, very likely the assets are custodied and stuff like copper, SEFU, institutional custody, which is not in smart contracts. So custodian risk is a big one. So that's something you have to take care of. Historically, custodians have been much better than smart contracts in terms of hacks. They don't lose money as much. As somebody who worked for a project that got hacked for $200 million, I know a thing or two about smart contract hacks, and custodians make me feel much safer. If you look at Ethena specifically, we delta hedge on centralized exchanges. Centralized exchanges have their own risks, obviously. You have operational risks. It's more similar to TradFi. Not everything's on chain. What else is a risk? Yeah, I think just custodian is probably the biggest bit that people trust you with. For example, Circle went through that a year and a half ago with Silverbank or whatever the bank they were using. So the banking system just didn't work, and you couldn't get your collateral. So custodian risks, big one. And decentralized is obviously, look at those more, but smart contract risk is the obvious one. You're going to get hacked. Some Argentinian kid's going to hack you, or North Koreans, or they're going to pretend they're 5 dudes when it's just 1 dude. So yeah, they should keep you at night because they have to be right just once. You have to be right every single day. So that's also pretty scary. So yeah.
So it depends. So it's all about how you structure. I actually think this connects to why I think Ethena is not a stable coin. I think the guys know it. But it's all about margin of safety. I think people use money, they don't care about the yield. And I think people that are working on yield-bearing stablecoins here, they know that the retail doesn't care. I think that the retail cares about deeply in-the-money instrument. So you don't really know how they work because you know they work. They're so far away from the default threshold. And so you need to make them very, very resilient. So in the case of Ethena, for example, which to me is a phenomenal project of tokenizing a basis trade with some like functionality around it, the problem is the margin of safety. There is not enough margin of safety. So you need to look at the reserve fund and the yield all the time to make sure that actually is fine, and that's not what money should be. So I think, but then it's difficult because if you have to keep a lot of margin of safety, then it's capital inefficient. So MakerDAO back in the day was very capital inefficient, was super safe. Now they are reducing the margin of safety because they're trying to survive based on the goodwill they created. But unfortunately, if you want to create good money, centralized or decentralized, you need to make stuff that is very resilient. Otherwise, people just don't use it as money. They use it as a yield product, which is a different thing.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the margin of safety in Ethena?
I mean, generally, like, whenever there's a synthetic dollar or dollar-denominated product, you always have to assume that something could go wrong. Like, we're in crypto long enough, everything blows up, all the time. Tether had its issues. It had DPEG situations. Circle had it. So I think it's just utterly reasonable to look at the reserve fund of anything. To be fair, if you're in TradFi, if you're registering somewhere that's not covered by the insurance, you're probably at the risk of a bank run. So I think this is a risk we always look at, even in the traditional banking system, 2008, the Circle thing as well. So the question is, can the Fed bail you out or not? If it's not, and that includes, I think, most of the TradFi, actually, you're still at risk, so you have to think about. So I don't fully disagree, but I feel like there's a point where this is not crypto native or Ethena native problem. Everything's at risk unless the Fed can print money. So.
Yeah, I agree, but it's also why like globally systemic banks have around like 14% core tier 1 ratio on top of their risk-weighted assets. So it's like if Ethena had $350 million in the reserve fund. It's not enough, obviously. There are reasons. There are reasons why sometimes the margin of safety is not enough. I don't want to get too nerdy about it, but for example, it's like Silicon Valley Bank, because you don't risk weight treasury bonds, and so like they had massive treasury bonds, they didn't have capital for that. But I agree, like, you know, capital is not panacea. You always need someone to bail you out at some point if things go bad, but margin of safety for money, so-called money products, needs to be thick. And it's difficult to have thick margin of safety with yield optimization at the same time.
Yeah. And do you think a decentralized alternative to Ethena could scale up and overtake Ethena? Do you ever think about that?
Oh, you talk to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not really, I think, because we could always integrate decentralized perps. Because if you want to do what Ethena does, and you take ETH, Bitcoin, you delta hedge it on perpetual futures exchanges, you need sufficient open interest on these venues. Centralized exchanges account for 95 to 90% of all the open interest of volume. So like, there's not much there yet. But if we wanted to, we could implement trading on perpetual futures exchanges and just kind of start using that as a venue. I think the user just wants scalable. I always say this. I think the user wants scalable yields. It doesn't often matter, unfortunately, where it comes from, which is why transparency is important. But for most users, it doesn't really matter. So if you use centralized exchanges and custodians, it doesn't seem to move the needle for them. It's like messaging apps. Like as much as we talk about privacy, people still use the most dog shit messengers out there. It's just doesn't seem to be top of mind for most people. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing things in terms of accountability and transparency, but for the user, scale is what matters the most, I think.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the time frame. So I think in the short term, it's way easier to bootstrap a stable coin that is based on non-commodity collateral. Let's call them decentralized stable coins. But these stable coins, to work, they need money, like unity of money. So they are connected. In the case of Tether and Circle, they are connected by the traditional banking system. So if you actually want to scale stable coins from $150 billion today, which is a ridiculously low number, to like serious numbers, you need a decentralized network on top. So either you just keep piggybacking on the centralized banking system, which sucks, that's why we're in crypto, or you have to build another one. So in my opinion, our vision of the future in M0 is like several centralized but well-managed issuers that are connected by a credibly neutral, decentralized, on-chain governance, which is always a combination.
Just out of interest, like, how do you mean to avoid the traditional banking system if you want to scale, just as an example?
Yeah, so the reason why, for example, like a lot of stable coins, they need to rely on significant amount of collateral in the banks because you need to get in and out the stable. And you need to have this like perfect peg dollar, like fiat dollar and crypto dollar. So you always go back and forth through the banking system. So you need to be connected to that. Otherwise, there is no uniqueness of money. So you can do it, but it's pretty bad. So like you have all these vintages of stable coins and they're connected to the banking system in some way. If you want to get out of it, like get away with it, you need to create a system. Maker is a good example, right? Maker has a lot of like issuers, which are like the CDP issuers, or in the case of Ethena through Spark, the billion that it gets into Ethena, and the protocol is wrapping all of them into like a unique risk framework, and they say, okay, I own DAI, I know some sort of like big average of this. And I think that we should keep iterating on that. If you do it, in the case of Maker, for example, Maker doesn't go through the banking system to have this pegging. But you need to create some sort of like meta governance that is as decentralized as possible that guarantees that the risk through the network is kind of homogeneous and is safe enough for you just to have a dollar and forget about it, forget about the rest.
How do you ensure there's liquidity for your stablecoins? If there's like a federation of stablecoins, like how do you ensure there's liquidity there?
So in the case of, so M0, I don't know if people know because I mean we just launched the mainnet this month, but it is we raised around $60 million over the last year from folks like Bain and Pantera and Galaxy, Wintermute, GSR, a few others. So we are actually creating a network where everyone mints the same. So like if you have 10 different issuers, assuming that you can make sure that they are designed in a way that is very, very similar with off-chain and on-chain controls, they all mint the same stable. So if you come in, because being a stablecoin minter is a good business, you're not fractionalizing liquidity, you're just bringing more liquidity into the same place, which is what's going on now in the banking system. If you have a JP Morgan account or a Barclays account, you don't have a JP Morgan dollar or a Barclays dollar. You have just a dollar. On top, there is the Fed that is kind of like homogenizing it. So the liquidity, the idea there is not to fractionalize liquidity. Then how you create liquidity between that stablecoin and the rest, you need money to start.
And do you think there's different strategies in go-to-market from centralized stablecoins to decentralized stablecoins?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. I think centralized stablecoins are way more limited what they can do because their business model is very monolithic. So in the case of Ethena, I think Ethena had a great go-to-market strategy with great timing, right? So like great timing with the basis trade. The basis trade size is your enemy, so that has a limit. Now there is like a farming program on top, but it's like it was a unique opportunity to scale it from 0 to $3.5 billion. For the others, it's very difficult to be flexible. You see Circle cannot share the yield, and Tether has its complexities. So I think that if you have a decentralized system, you have more flexibility in how you actually do things in a composable way with the rest of DeFi, which is useful.
Yeah, and what do you think, Seraphim?
Yeah, I think these are just slightly different products. So for example, the CDP space, the decentralized stablecoin space is typically CDPs. You put in ETH, you borrow against it, and you typically keep your upside in Ethereum or whatever assets you use as collateral. So you kind of like are able to leverage up on the price going up, right? Which is very useful for most market participants. Ethena is different. Ethena is like you put $100 worth of ETH, hypothetically, you get $100 worth of USDE, which means you're losing that upside on USD on Ethereum, right?
Yeah, no, I think that not necessarily the case. I think the problem that now is decentralized governance stablecoins, they work on decentralized collateral. And decentralized collateral is volatile, so people get leverage because they want to get the upside. But if you could like digest treasuries that have no upside with the same CDP system, you just do it because you want to get liquidity on your treasuries, not because you want to get lever long. Yeah, in theory. I would just probably look at the current TVL in the market. It seems to be CDP based at this point in time. So the difference is when when we started pitching Ethena in July to people, basically it didn't make a difference because the market was pretty sideways. It didn't matter if you put ETH in or you put dollars in because ETH was kind of sideways. But at this point in time, no, nothing to do with this, but yeah.
There's no bell.
Yeah, it's old-fashioned. But like, at this point in time, if you want to keep your upside in Ethereum, you use CDPs. If you have dollar assets, you're a fintech, you are a large fund and TradFi like Brevin Howard, you put your money into Ethena. There's ways around it that we've unlocked recently that's quite interesting. Like a lot of these Bitcoin whales are long Bitcoin, they borrow USDT against it, and then they put that into Ethena. So that was like a really interesting unlock for me as I was looking for new sources of liquidity where it's not just dollars, it's actual Bitcoin holders. And that narrative brought us at least probably $500 million or something like that. So I think the clientele is actually quite similar. The difference is probably that Ethena is somewhat more institutional if you're looking for really big tickets, whereas CDPs just cater to pretty much everyone who wants to keep upside in a really simple way. So I can talk about go-to-market for Ethena for years.
I think I partially agree. Again, I think the CDP doesn't necessarily be backed by volatile assets. It can be backed by whatever. CDPs, the world runs on CDPs. Like the repo market is a larger market in the world. It's a CDP overnight. I think that in the case of Ethena, I agree that the investors are more institutional because they're more sophisticated. So they're saying, why should I take a directional long on ETH? I will just get a structured long through a basis trade, which is a long trade. The reason why basis trade is yielding because the market is long skewed. So still, it keeps trading. It's a beautiful trade, but it's a dangerous trade. There was someone said once that the carry trade is once where you eat like a chicken and you shit like an elephant. So when things go bad, they go really bad. But these guys are very smart. So they know how to look at the signals and they move out. If you're retail, you're parking money on a stable coin, it's a bit more difficult to look at how actually the curve is moving. But it's been a super profitable trade. And the way the guys, they structured it and tokenized it was phenomenal. I also think the way they separated the counterparty risk through the use of custodians away from the exchanges was very innovative.
Yeah, I think that was the key unlock, because like it's true if you just put on the basis trade in the most grandma way possible, if your grandma does this kind of shit, but like if you just park money on some centralized exchange.
I hope they shouldn't.
My grandma's crazy, to be fair, so it's like, yeah, she would just, yeah, if you just park money on a centralized exchange, you would delta hedge it, and then you forget, the funding rate starts eating into it, the centralized exchange blows up. So it's true that if you just do the very basics, like degen stuff of this trade, you're probably going to get burned. But that's kind of why we came in, because we were like, if you add the institutional custody bit, where the money is not on the centralized exchange, and where we actively close trades, we have the, you know, if funding goes negative, Ethena can close these trades and probably buy the perp actually cheaper than it was. So if you actively manage that and shift into Tether, it's kind of fine. But it does require active management at size that for normal users kind of hard to do. And I think we came in here to really decrease that risk by just doing more active stuff, you know.
Yeah, but I think the last point I wanted to make, not necessarily on the Ethena design, which is fascinating, and I like to get nerdy on this stuff, but to scale a stablecoin is very difficult. That's true. Like, you know, to scale a stablecoin is very difficult. That's why we have like 1.5 player that is dominating this market. But the good news is that this market is minuscule. So, you know, it's good to scale a business in a market that is going from $150 billion probably to like $10 trillion in the next like 15 years. But it's not easy.
Yeah, Luca, you mentioned governance before. With stablecoins, do you think governance is a hindrance or a feature for them, and why?
I think governance is money. Like, you have dollars because you kind of trust the governance somehow of the issuer. So you need good governance for good money. So it's absolutely a necessary step to have good governance if you want to scale it.
Seraphim, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by saying it was hard. It was so easy. We just walked in and just kind of worked out. Just kidding. It was fucking hard. But yeah, I think governance, I see it at this point as necessary more for transparency and disclosure point of view. Like, you want people to know that it's fine, and there's voices out there that can come in and say, hey, do you have attestations of the custodians? Do you trade on proper venues? Stuff like that. With Ethena, because it's a lot of stuff is happening off-chain, you probably would never be able to like come in as a voter and say, can we shift positions from Binance to Binance? I mean, you probably could, but you couldn't force it on-chain just because it's off-chain. But what it does is it creates accountability, transparency, and pushes it in the right direction while still allowing us to scale. Yeah, that's the idea.
And I mean, I still think it's hard. Like, you know, $3 billion is not a scaled stable. Like, not even $100 billion is a scaled stable. So we still have a lot of, it's enough to make money for the project and the team, but I think that we need to be more ambitious in scaling. I think that if we want to conquer the market outside of DeFi trading. But yeah, going from 0 to 3.5, it was an incredible achievement for sure.
Yeah, and one final question, Seraphim, do you even think the debate between centralized and decentralized stablecoins is relevant? And if not, what is the right debate or question to ask?
Nah, it's one of these fucking panels where like we try to disagree, we don't disagree. It's fucking annoying, but it's like, yeah, but it's the truth. Like, I don't think it's a good idea that, like, I like the Tether guys, but I don't want it to be just Tether, right? They are like, they're able to buy these treasuries offshore and push policy even, do things that we can't do. But we don't want Tether to be in charge fully, right? Ethena, I don't want Ethena to be the biggest thing in crypto either, because it's an attack vector, right? So you need a lot of providers, kind of a democracy, checks and balances situation. And decentralized stablecoins, maybe they do not scale now, they will. Until then, they're providing necessary voices for transparency, disclosures, all that stuff that pushes more centralized guys like Ethena and Tether and Circle in the right direction. So I really tried to disagree during this debate. I assure you, I did my best, but it's fucking hard. I mean, we kind of agree that everything, or both decentralized and centralized kind of counterparties are important. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things, like the memes that got stuck with us in crypto that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like stablecoin as a term doesn't make sense. You know, it's over-indexing on a local property, which is stability. Like, it's like a turkey. Turkey has the best life in the world for 364 days a year. Very stable. Or like RWA, what the fuck is our like risk-weighted real-world asset? But so I think we need to go a bit deeper. I remember, like, I spent some time writing on, I don't know if someone knows that, but I have a Substack on DeFi called Dirt Roads that I've been writing for a few years. Back in the day when I was thinking about algorithmic stablecoins, you remember it was a thing. Every stablecoin was algorithmic. So it was more about endogenously collateralized versus exogenously collateralized stablecoins. But it takes a while to go into the rabbit hole. So I think we need to evolve a bit so we can go back disagreeing on stuff. So if we have better separations of the camps.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thanks, guys, for coming up, and we'll see you around.
Dave, can you talk to us like Biden's wife? Be like, you did it, Joe. You answered all the questions.
You did it. Thanks, everyone.